I want to welcome everyone to the IDEA tutorial. Thank you for joining us and welcome again. We have been doing these tutorials for the last 2 months. This is the third one in the series, and our purpose for all these tutorials is to introduce the evaluation program, describe the IDEA protocol, and present examples. And today we're excited to talk about IDEA evaluations and incorporating those, or what we call deploying IDEA. So welcome and thank you for joining us. We're on tutorial number 3. Today we have our IDEA tutorial principal team. From left to right, we have Ryan Berg, and Ryan is the principal in Ryan Berg and Associates. We also have Daniel Alzamora. Daniel is a senior geotechnical engineer from the Federal Highway Administration. Jim Collin is here joining us from the Collin Group, and Jim also serves as president of the Geo-Institute Board of Governors. And finally, on our team, who may join us later on today, Silas Nichols. Silas is a principal geotechnical engineer at the Federal Highway Administration. All the information that we're talking about today, the protocols that we're discussing, some of the evaluation procedures, any timelines that we discuss, they are found in a federal highway document, Highway Innovation Developments, Enhancements, and Advancements, the IDEA program. You can find this document and download it from the Geo-Institute website. You can see from the screen, you would go to the home screen under Special Projects, and then there's an IDEA tab that you can link to. You can choose, and on there you'll see information about the IDEA program, as well as that's where we house any evaluation reports of wall systems. So we're here today in tutorial number 3, and today we're talking about deploying IDEA. You'll hear from Daniel Alzamora of the Federal Highway, Jerry DiMaggio of ARA. Recall, if you attended the last tutorials, you can log your questions anytime during the tutorial. Just use the chat screen. Jim Collin is manning the questions, and we'll have a Q&A session after. You'll hear from Daniel and Jerry. And then finally, we'll do a very quick wrap up at the end. And I do want to let you know that this video is being recorded, and they are archived on the Geo-Institute YouTube channel. So if you haven't attended number 1 and 2, you can take a look at those at YouTube, and we're asking that you please subscribe to that channel. So thank you for your attention. What I will do now is stop sharing and turn it over to Daniel to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Let me share my screen. Jeff, is it sharing?
Daniel, yes, it's sharing now.
Okay, great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank everybody for participating and attending this series of webinars where we're working on deploying the IDEA program for our intention for the state DOTs and as well for in general practice from owners to system suppliers and then the private sector as well. Just a quick outline for today's presentation. We're going to just go briefly review what we've covered in the previous webinars and talk a little bit about the benefits of IDEA. Want to talk a little bit about what state DOTs are currently doing, maybe some of the issues that we see in our current approach, and possible methods or suggestions of how to apply or implement IDEA by the state DOTs. As Jeff mentioned, Jerry DiMaggio and I are going to be delivering this presentation today. He and I are going to interrupt each other as needed to add any additional commentary. It won't be a normal presentation. I'd like to keep it a discussion, and so Jerry and I will kind of have a conversation and go through the presentation, but he might add some commentary in during my portion of the presentation, and I might add some commentary during Jerry's portion of the presentation. So that is planned kind of interruptions of each other, just to let you know. Again, as Jeff mentioned, please submit your questions as we're going through the presentation. It doesn't necessarily have to be regarding this particular presentation. It could be about maybe a question that you didn't ask or came to you after the previous two sessions. So go ahead and put those questions into the chat pod as they come up. So we'll start off with a little bit of a review. So in the first webinar that we had, we talked a little bit about IDEA and what IDEA is and how it came to be, and we talked about how IDEA has now replaced the high-tech evaluations as the standard evaluations for MSE walls. We talked about the partnership that we have, the Federal Highway Administration has with the Geo-Institute. So as Jeff mentioned at the beginning, the IDEA evaluations and information about state DOT's requirements are all going to be housed under the Geo-Institute's special projects website that Jeff mentioned earlier. So one of the first things that we talked about is the basic principle that MSE walls are not a new technology. We consider MSE walls mature. They are being used in every state in the country. They're being used by the private sector as well as the public sector in many different types of applications, loading conditions, materials, facing elements, reinforcements. The evaluations are not meant to look at if MSE walls work, like high-tech at the beginning was. That was developed in the early 1990s, mid-1990s. We are looking now at a mature technology, and we know that MSE walls work. We have established design and construction guidance by FHWA and AASHTO, where we didn't have that in the 90s. So that, I think, is a key point in the differences between the high-tech evaluations and the IDEA evaluations. The program addresses MSE walls, gravity modular blocks, and other earth-cleaning systems. IDEA is set up to possibly in the future look at other types of systems, but in the current practice or program, we're looking at these particular items. The other component of IDEA that I think it's important to make sure that we cover is that it allows for innovations. So innovations is difficult to incorporate into our practice if it's not in an FHWA or AASHTO guidance, right? We have a very difficult time in FHWA and state DOTs implementing new things that are coming up because it's difficult to have to know how they impact our designs and have that independent evaluation. So IDEA gives us that flexibility, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. It also provides some maintenance of these evaluations. In high tech, I've been involved in high tech evaluations in the late 90s, 2000, and those evaluations were probably still what's current now, even though those specific systems maybe have changed slightly than what were the evaluations compared to what was done in the evaluations in the 20 years ago. Things changed, but there was no mechanisms to accommodate those changes. With IDEA, we're hoping that this maintenance process of the evaluations allows to have current evaluations for the owners to incorporate into their projects. And we're looking at a faster and less expensive process than what we have been doing with high tech. And I'll cover a little bit more of what I mean by that a little bit later. And we did talk about that information in the second webinar. In the second webinar, we worked through some example evaluations, and we looked specifically at a new system and a system renewal or an update to a system, so that people can see what is involved in doing these evaluations. Also, who is on the review teams and what are the review processes for these evaluations. We also talked about the different stages of the evaluations, as well as the costs and the flexibility of the process, how a system supplier submits their submittal in stages, right? So they have one stage, and they can make adjustments or decisions at each part of the stage to give them flexibility if they need to add some more information or go back to get some additional research or data for a given evaluation. So these, I think Jeff mentioned also that this is being recorded, and the previous two webinars were recorded. And if you're interested in or missed those previous two webinars, if you just do a search on Google or YouTube for Geo-Institute IDEA tutorial, I've already checked that. It should pop out in the first couple of search items, and you'll see two of them already on there, and after today you'll see a third recording of the webinar. So if you're interested in going back or revisiting a particular question, feel free to go back through those and let us know if you have any questions about that. So the next part is I wanted to talk briefly about some of the benefits of incorporating IDEA. So I've broken this out, even though these are very similar for the owner side of the equation, which can be a state or a private entity, public owners, designers, contractors. They have a specific need, but suppliers and system suppliers also have a need, and I think there's benefits for both. These are independent evaluations of MSE walls. So that is, I think, a big benefit to all of the owners to be able to look at the information that's being provided by the suppliers and compare that to these evaluations to just reassure themselves that what is being provided is consistent with standard practice. and that they work together, that the system components work together. These evaluations have, and through the Geo-Institute, we have access to a wide range of experts to address these system-specific items. For instance, corrosion experts or polymer science experts for the geosynthetics, or whatever type of specific need, maybe a structural element that needs to be reviewed, or whatever specific component that needs to be looked at that we may or may not anticipate at the moment. We have that ability to access more people with much wider range of expertise to look at what comes in through these submittals. The reports in the submittals are consistent. The submittals that are prepared and presented to the evaluation team are part of the reports that are prepared as appendices, and these are going to be more consistent from one system to another, so that if one wants to is interested in looking at a specific item in that evaluation or has a question about what was submitted and how it was looked at, one can, as an owner or a designer, contractor, whoever, can go back and look at those appendices and be easy to find that information in these reports. We have flexibility to accommodate the changes in guidance and requirements, as well as new technologies. Again, that innovation component could be part of these evaluations, and also part of accommodating changes in our guidance. For instance, our current AASHTO has now made some changes, significant changes in the way we do the internal stability for geosynthetic reinforced MSE walls. So how are those going to be accommodated into the practice? Well, if those kind of things come down the line, those can be incorporated or accommodated in these evaluations much more easily. There will be a single location for all of these evaluation reports, as well as the state requirements that for the approval of these systems. And that's, well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but we're working on that at the moment. The information will be readily available online, and it will be free of charge. If you're familiar or trying to get a high-tech evaluation for a given system, unless you get it from a physical copy from a supplier, they're very difficult. There are no PDF files of these high-tech evaluations. They're not online anywhere, so they're difficult to obtain. These idea evaluations will all be on the Geo-Institute's website and will be available to everyone, and they will be free of charge. They will be up to date and current. So from an owner's perspective, you have some assurance, or you can compare what is being provided to your site or in your shop drawings to what you have reviewed and approved for that system. It's a little bit more difficult in our current practice. So we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. For the system suppliers, again, from the opposite side of that coin, you have very similar benefits. You have an independent evaluation of the systems, which you can promote to your clients, the contractors, consultants, and so on, for inclusion into their project. It's a consistent evaluation report submittal. So again, it makes it easy for both sides of that coin, the supplier side as well as the owner side. And again, the flexibility is a benefit to both. There is some reduced time and cost of these evaluations. Again, we're not looking at a research document here. We're evaluating information that is already that has been prepared by the suppliers. So that allows us to make this a much more efficient evaluation than what we have been doing in the past, which makes the cost significantly lower. Again, you can promote these evaluations to your clients as a single location for all of these evaluations, as well as what's required by the states in this particular case. And again, it's free of charge to everyone. So it's not just for the DOTs or federal highways, it's to everyone. This information will be available to all for free. So you can direct anybody to that site and for them to get these reports. So at this point, I'm going to pass the baton on to Jerry.
I'm here.
Go ahead, Jerry. And now, and just a FYI for everyone, I'm controlling the slides, so Jerry will have to ask me to advance the slides as we go along.
Sure. Good afternoon, good morning to everybody, and thank you for joining us. As Daniel will explain, we'll do a bit of a tag team here. I'll cover the next 7 slides or so. I want to make a couple of comments in terms of the evaluations and the approval concepts. Everybody that I deal with today is, and every day in my life now, is usually a bit younger than me, sometimes a lot younger than me. And I think it's important to reflect, as I'll get into, how we ended up where we're at today. And then I'll quickly get into the material. So I can be blamed for instigating the high-tech program related to retaining structures in the 1980s. In the early 1980s, when the explosion of wall systems became really unmanageable for not only federal highways, but for the state agencies, the information that was available in the ASHTO at that time standard specifications, working stress and load factor design, didn't exist really until 1987. So as Daniel previously mentioned, the focus of IDEA and the reason why you'll find these evaluation reports to be quite succinct and abbreviated as compared to what you saw in high-tech, those of you who are familiar with that, is now, as those of you are familiar with the ASHTO bridge specifications, this is kind of the Bible. And our IDEA evaluations, those reports, just finalized one today, in fact, is only 7 pages in length. So how can that be? Well, we're focused on the submittal meeting all the requirements of ASHTO. And where submittals are evaluated by the IDEA review team, we sometimes go through multiple iterations. In fact, often and routinely for the ones that have been done thus far, that has been the situation. So we're focused on the innovations and the unique aspects of the system. And that's important to keep in mind when we talk about the IDEA process. It's not only the evaluation report, but the submittal that's provided, the final version of the submittal that is by the wall supplier, is integral and is tantamount to the value that's provided by IDEA. So there's a little bit of confusion now to get to task on the slides, evaluations versus approval. Well, in the vision that we have as federal highways and then the team of experts that have been engaged through the GI process, is that we like for you to think of the IDEA evaluation as being part of the approval process, certainly not to take away any of your responsibility or your authority. And we're hopeful that the evaluation reports, and I'll refer to them as evaluation reports to be all-inclusive of the submittal as well as the abbreviated unique aspects that I mentioned just a moment ago, they can lead to an approval, and they will lead, hopefully, to a more expeditious approval of systems. So if anybody is of the mind and is still thinking what's the difference between evaluation and approval, the evaluations that are being performed as we speak are not meant to be an approval process on their own. So the owners still must be taking the authority and responsibility for the approval. That's a given. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. There's a little bit of a delay, folks, so just bear with us. So what's current practice reflect to us today? And I'll paraphrase a little bit the bullets that you see in front of you. And I want to remind you with the first lead comment here is that this is kind of the combined understanding of the expert consultants that have been retained, our view of the world. It's not reflective of any particular agency's individual practice. There really isn't any consistent practice for evaluating systems. And some folks, not everybody at the DOT agency level, use and refer explicitly to high-tech reports as a necessary component for making the approval decisions. Some agencies have an abbreviated list of specialty consultants that do evaluations for systems. A number of the folks on the line today, including myself, serve in that capacity on an as-needed basis. Some agencies, in fact, probably all agencies, concurrently do some level of in-house staff reviews. It'd be irresponsible if they didn't, of course. Some, and a growing number we know and we're hopeful, include idea evaluations with and without the supplemental information and evaluation. And Daniel will pick up on that as we go forward on this presentation. Almost every agency uses their approved product list in some capacity for some of the components or for the overall system relative to the approval process. And perhaps most folks on the line, if not all of you, are familiar with approved product systems and lists that are used in civil engineering practice really internationally with different nuances. Next slide, please. Now, what we're doing currently is wonderful, but there are a few issues, and they're captured in, again, our view of the world with current practice. System evaluation by agencies are very inconsistent. That's to be expected for really anything that, when I spent 32 years with federal highways, it was well understood, and it is well understood by federal highway staff today, that there is a lot of variation of almost everything that's done by the individual states. Sometimes that's good, but that leads to a high degree of inefficiency in many cases. In particular, for today's world, in the second bullet, these evaluations of the MSE systems, explicitly that we're referring to, it require a large amount of in-house resources. That might be a direct cost to a consultant, as I mentioned before, to do a third-party review, and the scarcity of staff. A number of state agencies, as you may know, hopefully not on a personal basis, are on furlough situations. So how you learn to do less with less has become really the more appropriate cliche than how you do more with less. Some agencies, frankly, don't have the in-house expertise to conduct these evaluations. And you heard Daniel speak at length of the broad spectrum that have been individually identified to serve the needs of the MSE idea evaluations. You couldn't possibly have all those experts in-house. The requirements for the evaluation by the approved consultants also vary quite a lot, and that would seem to be something simple as standardized, but it's really not standardized whatsoever because the individual evaluation requirements by the respective states varies considerably. Daniel touched on the second to the last bullet in terms of when you conduct an evaluation, it really isn't a convenient nor a consistent process by which you can reflect what is actually being constructed in the field. So as everybody probably knows, the standard protocol today, which really again began in about the early 80s, was to move from a fully developed set of plans on an individual project design basis to what is commonly referred to as 3-line drawings. When you issue a 3-line drawing with approved systems and then the shop drawings come in for the contractor selected approved system, it's very common, and I said very common, to where submitted systems often don't reflect what has been approved through the respective approval process. In fact, the individual who might be responsible for the system approval might not, and often is not, involved in the review of the shop drawings and the design submittals for a particular project. Finally, it's very difficult to improve evaluations for a particular system. So how can we include high tech? Excuse me, how can IDEA be included? And cover one of 3 slides here quite quickly as we move along. And this particular webinar, I think, really reaches the essence of what IDEA is all about. It's not to undercut or undersell the first 2 webinars, but this is really the vision that the parties had in mind, beginning with FHWA, the review team, and then GI. First, we need to understand, and I've already covered, IDEA is not an approval or a certification process. It's an evaluation for the uniqueness of a particular system, which is above and beyond what is dictated and put out as good practice by AASHTO. Remember, AASHTO can be a code or AASHTO can be a guide specification, depending on what the particular system is. And I'm not just referring to MSE and how it's implemented. That is AASHTO by the respective agency. These IDEA evaluations are quite succinct. They're not research documents, but they're meant to summarize the technical summarization of the system and how they're combined to design and construct a wall in accordance with national guidance. And that being, again, depending on the agency, FHWA guidance and AASHTO guidance, and in particular state guidance. Next slide, please.
If you don't mind, I just want to add one little comment on that second bullet, Jerry, and that is, we talked about innovation, and innovation, that by definition is probably not in our current guidance or federal highway guidance or in AASHTO. So how do we look at that? And I think what we would look at is how do these innovations or changes to a system that may or may not be directly covered in AASHTO or in conflict with AASHTO or federal highway guidance impact the overall performance of that system. And that's, I think, an important part. In that second item, we say we're reviewing these in accordance with our current national guidance, but we also need to recognize that if we want to have innovation, we can't, those innovations won't be in our current practice, and we need to see how those innovations or changes impact the performance of the systems in relation to our current practice. That's all I had to add there, Jerry.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and you can go to the next slide, but just a good example of that. Many of you who religiously read the AASHTO bridge specifications, and I'm referring to the design specs, not the construction specs, although both are great documents. There's always a lag when there is an introduction of a new technology or a new material or an innovation, as Daniel just spoke to. And I'd ask you to think of soil nailing. We built literally on highway structures in this country thousands, if not tens of thousands, of soil nail walls before there was approved guidance in AASHTO. So you can't have innovation automatically be instantaneously applied in codes and guidance. So how can IDEA be included? The evaluations, the innovations, all of that information is really recorded in these submittals. It's just like it was for a high-tech submittal. And I want to stress again, the performance bar here is being evaluated. Also, it's being evaluated in the context of the Asheville Bridge design and construction specifications. And for geosynthetics, the NetPAP reports are used to document the geosynthetic properties. For the evaluations, as I've repeatedly, and Daniel has mentioned as well, we don't generate new information. We're simply reviewing what's being provided. If the submittals sometimes are not totally cooked and gelled correctly in accordance to what an expectation that might be required by a state, where we're giving that information back to the supplier and providing opportunities and sometimes multiple opportunities. The state or the owner is still responsible to review the evaluation report and to approve the system based on the assessment of the evaluation. And a detailed review of the submittal is not necessary for system approval. However, personally, I would encourage you to still review that. Now, detailed review you can interpret as you choose, but that detailed review has been done for you and is reflected in the evaluation report. So we're not taking your authority away. And finally, last slide for me, Daniel, 3 of 3.
Mm-hmm.
How can we include IDEA? So the vision that we have in Federal Highways and GI has is that the DOTs and owners would incorporate and accept IDEA as a tool for the system approval used by public owners. Now, we recognize that owners will require some supplemental information that's in addition to the IDEA evaluation, and that the owner would modify their current approval requirements to include IDEA. And as Daniel will speak to in just a moment, possibly the current requirements for submittals at an individual agency level might be reduced and streamlined and made more uniform. So Daniel, let me turn that back over to you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Hey, Daniel, this is Jim. Before you continue, I just want to remind everybody that they can submit questions, and that's right in the chat box right to the right of the video. So please send in your questions if you have them. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, no problem, Jim. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, so I'm going to continue on, and I put this slide in here just to remind me that we were switching between Jerry and I. But as Jerry was talking about, you know, the IDEA program and the protocols that were developed for the evaluations may or may not cover all the needs of a given state, and it's difficult to put something together because of the variability and the independence of each one of the state DOTs. So we've put together these protocols, but we recognize that there are some additional information that a given state might need, but may not be needed in another state. So there was one report that was completed for Minnesota DOT that's already posted on the website, and we are currently working on 15 state DOTs to develop reports that summarize the additional or supplemental requirements above and beyond what's in the supplemental in the IDEA evaluation reports, and those states are listed here. So I really, what my intention is to get every state DOT's information posted on the Geo-Institute's website. So the Minnesota in blue was done prior to 2020. The green states here, colored in green, are the ones that we are currently working on, and those reports will be online here in the next couple of months, I would imagine. So I'd say by February or so, we'll have the reports of those 15 states. We are currently in the process of putting together the contracting for a phase 1 and phase 2 of 2021 work, which will be the phase 1 will be the states in orange, which cover 20 additional states. So I'm hoping to have definitely, all the greens and orange and the blue all completed by, say, the end of the summer of 2021. And the remaining yellow states, the states colored in yellow, hopefully maybe by the end of the calendar year, I need to find some additional funding in order to get that work done, but I'm sure I'll be able to get that. I just don't have it at the moment. But when I do have that funding, we'll put together that effort and finish off 52 states and territories that are covered by federal highways. So at the end of all this work, we'll have all 52 reports that cover all of the summarize all the supplemental information for every single state and territory in the country. So just to give you an idea, and this is from the Minnesota report of, and Ryan Berg covered a little bit of this during the second webinar, but just give you an idea of some of the items that are included in these additional requirements. For instance, in Minnesota, they have this requirement to provide an erection construction guide that is Minnesota DOT specific. So again, this would not be something that it would be in the IDEA evaluation, of course, because it's very specific to Minnesota DOT, but would be listed as what would be additional information that Minnesota DOT requires for their approval of systems in their state. Another one is they want a list of prior publicly funded projects completed within the past 5 years in Minnesota and/or climate similar to Minnesota, with contact dates and construction and so on. So that again would be something that would be very specific to the Minnesota DOT. That would be required in addition to what's submitted by what is prepared in the evaluation reports from IDEA. Another one would be to provide design drawings detail of the leveling pad, which meets Minnesota DOT special provisions. Again, that would be something that would be very specific to the Minnesota DOT, and would be in addition to, that would not be covered in the IDEA evaluation, and would be something that would be needed to be submitted in addition to the evaluation. But hopefully, these evaluations cover most of what's required for the state DOT's approval process. And I'm hoping that these evaluations, and there's two sides of this. One is that maybe our evaluation protocols, as we develop these lists of additional requirements, we will have an opportunity to, after we get maybe this next round of 20, we'll have 35 states listed. So maybe there'll be an opportunity for us to look at the evaluation protocols and maybe make some revisions to what's in IDEA to incorporate things that are common across most of the state DOTs that we see, to hopefully reduce the supplemental information that is required by incorporating them into the initial IDEA evaluation. So this effort that we're doing will help us develop or make these revisions or changes, modifications to the protocols so that we could be more efficient. On the other hand, from hopefully the state DOTs can look at these evaluation protocols and the additional requirements and take a real good look at how to make this process a little bit more efficient in what is required and additional requirements and so on, and try to remove some of those redundancies that are in the requirements for the state DOTs to help optimize the process. So again, we're just getting the process moving with all of these supplemental reports for each state DOT. So there'll be a little bit of a learning process, and we're moving forward with that. So I wanted to give you some idea of some of the wording that's out there from different state DOTs. I've removed any names of state DOTs just so that there is just to keep them generic, although they are from specific state DOT requirements. For instance, in this one, the application for pre-qualification of a system requires a complete technical evaluation report from a high-tech or an independent review of an approved MSE wall system expert and a review by DOT engineers. So again, it's kind of similar to what Jerry was talking about. We refer to high-tech as an evaluation, but you could also have an MSE wall system expert review it, but it has to be an approved MSE wall by that given state DOT. Another one is to first check if the system is acceptable for consideration. Second, in this particular state, second, submit the package similar to a high-tech for consideration. I would maybe ask the question, would a idea evaluation be a similar evaluation to the high-tech for this given state? Third, if submitted material acceptable to the DOT, then have a professional engineer acceptable to the state review the system. So again, they have three different steps here, and at the end of the day, they still require a professional engineer to review the system. For first-time evaluations of MSE wall systems, a consultant expert evaluation report is required unless a high-tech report for the system is available. And then consultant expert evaluations must be from one of the pre-approved firms listed herein. So again, very similar type of language by three different states. Here's another one. In this state, they're beginning to incorporate IDEA, again, requiring a high-tech evaluation or an IDEA evaluation report in this particular state. So it's beginning to get moving forward and incorporating both as alternatives. After an MSE wall system is approved, a renewal is required if the system changes or every 5 years from the date of the approval. So again, they're beginning to incorporate some of the maintenance components of what we've been talking with IDEA. So obviously a high-tech evaluation might be fairly old, and if they're requiring a 5-year approval, you may need to do an IDEA evaluation in order to maintain that. For new system applications, provide a high-tech evaluation, again, including in this particular example, allowing IDEA as one of the available evaluation approval process. Another one here, an IDEA evaluation. So here they included an IDEA evaluation report plus these additional supplemental information. So fairly straightforward, and it's getting closer to what might be where we would like to see or suggest states consider going towards, right? So here's what we suggest as possible changes to the state requirements. Replace the references to high-tech with IDEA. I would imagine that for now, you would probably include both IDEA and a high-tech or a high-tech evaluation. There's going to be a little bit of lag in a transition period. I think having a requirement for making sure that you have that the systems that are being supplied are current or are what you have reviewed is important. So something within the past 5 years is what we've been using as the maintenance interval of 5 years. And if somebody has, for instance, an old high-tech evaluation, and I think we covered this in our second webinar, and they haven't made any changes to their facing, reinforcements, design, connections, or anything like that, then an updated evaluation of that high-tech.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
And that was Siri trying to tell me what to do. So you could have them do a very quick evaluation of their system just to confirm that there's no changes, and append a letter to their high-tech evaluation to make it current, for example. And it's okay to have consultants in your practice as part of the review process for IDEA, for the approval process in your state. But you might be able to incorporate, if a particular system has done an IDEA evaluation, the consultant that's doing that review would incorporate the IDEA evaluation as part of their evaluation, and just their work would be adding the supplemental requirements and looking at that, and then coming up with some recommendations to the state based on their evaluations of the IDEA evaluation plus the supplemental information that's required. But again, it would make everybody's life a lot easier by having that IDEA evaluation incorporated into what the consultants are reviewing. It just shortcuts the process a little bit. You may need to have some sort of a grace period for this change. So that's why having the high-tech and IDEA, some transitional period here might be in order to make sure that we don't come up with some unanticipated, unintended consequences of these changes. But in the next 3 to 5 years, I would imagine that we would be able to have the process completed. I would hope. So what happens after the systems are through the approval process? So you've completed the evaluations. The DOT has reviewed the evaluation reports. The DOT or the owners have approved the system for use, and the system has been selected to meet the project-specific requirements by a consultant or a contractor in a given project, right? So now you would take a look, the owner or your consultants would take a look at the designs and the shop drawings that are submitted for that given project, and they should be consistent with what is in your current IDEA evaluation reports or in your approval in what has been approved for that given system. And that you should be doing that currently, right? It might be consistent with what's in the high-tech evaluation or in your consultant reports. The project design details should reflect performance requirements, drainage, architectural, everything else that's needed. The design and shop drawings need to be stamped by a PE. That's normal review of the design and shop drawings by the owner. And then the wells constructed in accordance with the plans and specifications and referencing the shop drawings that were developed for the specific project with the specific details. And again, going back to what was in the idea evaluations or the evaluations that were used to approve the system for that state. So in summary, and I think this is my last slide, and then we can go to Q&A. So again, please, if you have any questions, add them to the chat that you have available. From looking at what people are doing currently, the state DOTs are requiring these system evaluations either through a high-tech evaluation, currently an idea evaluation, either doing a consultant review. So clearly there's a need to do these evaluations. The intent of IDEA is to try to consolidate this and be more efficient in the way we do these. We are all very busy. The state DOTs, the system suppliers, the consultants, we're all very busy. And I think this provides a way to optimize our time by being more consistent across the country and having one evaluation report that cover most, if not all, of the requirement by a given state. And then each state DOT would still be responsible to approve those evaluations or those systems. The process is currently state by state and not consistent, so I just covered that. Each state DOT and system supplier assigns significant resources to prepare, submit, and review submittals. So again, I just covered that again. We all spend a lot of time in doing these, and none of us have enough time and resources and funds to do these over and over and over again. IDEA streamlines and improves the efficiency of the process. So again, just trying to make or reduce our efforts across the country in in something that we are all doing the same thing over and over and over again. Improve the ability to make changes and incorporate innovations to the system. Gives us an ability to improve what we do so that we can take advantage of all the research and all the innovations and all the good practices that the system suppliers do into our practice. I like saying that these evaluations are a communication tool between the private sector and federal highway DOTs and the public sector. I think it's a good way to make it more efficient and ensure that the system submittals that are being supplied are consistent with what we have approved or what the state DOTs have approved.
Hey Daniel, if I could add something before we go to Q&A and then you do your marketing slide here, is we talk about innovations, and I've been fortunate in my career. I was working really when the original metallic system was introduced in the United States. And I just want to, for those of you not familiar with the history and the evolution, think of the innovations, and I'll rattle them off, a half a dozen here. At one time, there was no such thing as understanding what design life protocol meant. And that applies to both geosynthetic as well as metallic reinforcement. The concrete strengths on facing panels were significantly less than what the standard care is today. The joint material was very different, material type not only, and then the engineering characteristics. the backfill that was permissible was very different than the standards that we require today. And that's just a sampling of innovations that occurred because we recognized the benefit to not only the walls system suppliers, but to the public from a private as well as a public entity point of view. So the design protocols that we have today weren't with us from day one when mechanically stabilized earth systems were introduced to the United States, or in fact worldwide. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, Jerry. All right, excellent comments. Again, here's our contact information for myself. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, I'm one of the senior geotechnical engineers with the Federal Highway Administration Resource Center. You can also direct questions to Silas Nichols. He's the principal geotechnical engineer for the Federal Highway Administration, and there's his contact information. You could take a look at the information that's in the website below for the Geo-Institute special projects under IDEA for information. And I'm sure that Jim, Ryan, or Jerry would be happy to answer any questions if you have a specific one to address to them. But at this point, Jim, I'll go ahead and pass it back on to you. I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can address any questions that come up.
Great, thanks, Daniel and Jerry. Nice job presenting today. I've got a few questions before I go to the ones that have been submitted, and there's still time, please, to submit questions if you've got something you'd like to learn more about. My first question is, as the supplemental state requirements are developed, how will these be maintained current? Daniel, that's probably you that's going to have to answer that, I think.
I think, well, I think it's you and me, Jim. but I'm hoping right now, state DOT requirements are set based on what they're currently doing, and we're looking at the supplemental information that's required based on what's the current practice at these state DOTs. As they make changes to accommodate IDEA or other changes, we will need to have a way to make not only the evaluations current, but also maintain these requirements current. So I know that we currently don't have that mechanism to update these supplemental reports, but it's something that I think between Federal Highways and the Geo-Institute, we need to have a conversation about how to make or keep these supplemental information and the requirements current with what's in the state DOTs. So I guess we will have something available, but it's something I think the Geo-Institute and Federal Highways will have to come up with a process to do that.
And so I agree, Daniel, but I think it's almost that can happen seamlessly, I think. So if a state has going through this process and they have a list of X number of things that are an additional requirements to the IDEA evaluations, and they come back at some point and say, no, we've changed it and we're going to do less, which is, I hope, what they're all going to come back with. Then we just get that list and we post it again. So I think that can happen very quickly on the GI side of that, right?
Yeah, I agree. And it's something that, I know Silas and I wanted to have those kind of conversations with the state DOTs at some point after we've put, this initial round of where we are now. But yeah, we're gonna, I think it shouldn't be a big deal to maintain and update these. We just need to be made aware of these changes.
This is Ryan. Jim, I just would add that I agree with you that the onus is really going to be on the individual state DOTs. When they change a policy, link, or whatever, they can take a look at the document that they have on the IDEA website. If that should change, they should simply just contact the IDEA webmaster and say, here are the modifications we need. It really should be a fairly straightforward process, I believe, as long as the states initiate it.
Right. Thanks, Ryan. So kind of a follow-up to that is, in the information you've received to date from states as far as additional requirements, how substantial are those requirements? And a follow-up to that question is, of those supplemental requirements, have you gone through and seen how redundant they are with the IDEA requirements? So my sense is that a lot of the DOT's requirements, maybe not understanding IDEA, a lot of their requirements are covered with the IDEA requirements.
Yeah, so it really is a wide range between the states and what we've seen. And Ryan, please, after I finish here, you can add your thoughts on this, or Jerry. We've seen a wide range of what the additional information that is needed. There is a lot of redundancy in what's required and what's in IDEA. We're trying to pick out and summarize what those differences are. I think as we move forward through this process, I'm hoping that as state DOTs make those changes to their requirements, we start seeing some reduction in that, so that it becomes a lot more streamlined and a lot more efficient for the states and for the consultants or whoever else is doing those evaluations. Ryan?
Sure, I would just add, it certainly is a very wide variety of requirements, from simply fully accepting an IDEA report to an additional 5-6 pages of information, a list of information to be submitted. And I think this goes back to, I believe, one of Jerry's earlier comments, that some of the state current requirements really reflect MSE systems as a new type of wall system. And as he mentioned, it's really a mature technology, and that's reflected in the difference between the old high-tech protocol and the new IDEA protocol, which is a much shorter list because it's a mature technology. So I think that's where we're seeing some of these longer lists in some of the states. It looks more like an old high-tech list. And again, with the mature technology, that much detailed information probably really doesn't benefit anyone.
If I can just add, agreeing with what Daniel and Ryan said, there's a temporal effect here too. IDEA is really brand new. And I mean, high tech, I don't think anybody can disagree. It worked, but it was not the most efficient process. And states, and I can't speak for the states, but I surmise the scarcity and long gaps between availability of high-tech reports, the states had no choice but to develop some of this additional requirements as we're referring to them today. With this new IDEA process that's much more efficient and the maturity of the actual code, that probably will go away fairly quickly, hopefully quicker than even we imagine it will go away.
All right, next question. This was submitted. I'm going to modify a little bit. So far, there have been 3 system evaluations that have been completed. One in 2018, one in 2019, and one in 2020. And the question is, how many systems are currently under evaluation? And then, not asking that question, but I'm going to ask it, is what's the typical turnaround time for the evaluation so far? So I guess I can answer the first part of that question. And maybe Ryan can help me with the second part. But so currently, so we have 3 that have been evaluated. one this year. We currently have 3 additional systems that are being evaluated this year, and I anticipate that all 3 will be completed by the end of the year or very shortly into 2021. And we have a couple other system suppliers that we're in the talking process with about having their systems evaluated. And then as far as the evaluations that have been done, Ryan, can you help me with that? I think I have in my mind what it's taking, but maybe you should tell me what you think so far.
8 to 12 weeks range, I guess. You know, the timing is dependent upon the quality of the submittals and just the timing for the reviewers and timing for the suppliers making the submittal. And if there's some back and forth, that's going to take a little bit of time, but it is a much quicker process than a high tech.
And I think when they run longer than that 8 to 12 weeks total, it's because there's been information that was not available or provided in the initial submittal that required some additional work. But when the system supplier has all the information, the review happens in that 8 to 10 week, 12 week period. Let's see. Is there next?
I was just going to add, you know, our initial intent and our goal for a full evaluation was to get these done in 12 weeks. And, you know, that might be optimistic. It might be, you know, difficult to achieve in some cases. But again, the thoughts, I don't want to use that word idea. The thought process was, let's have an aggressive out of the box goal for the time frame for these evaluations. We want to keep these short. The high-tech evaluations, from my understanding, were taking up to a year to complete, and in some cases longer than that. So, you know, having a 3-month period kind of time frame to get these evaluations completed, and with all the back and forth that goes on, I think it's a significant improvement in the way we proceed and in the efficiency of the evaluations.
But I think we've achieved that partly because we have reduced and streamlined the evaluation requirements from the initial high-tech requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So in your presentation today, you suggested we might add additional requirements to the IDEA requirements, and because some states might, you know, because of the questions that states have, the additional information they want. And I would suggest that we will be resistant to that in order to keep the IDEA evaluations streamlined and quickly done and efficient, and that the DOTs maybe consider eliminating some of these old requirements that were relevant for brand new technologies, but not technology that's been around for 30 or 40 years.
And that I agree with you as far as trying to optimize these requirements. I was just saying that if there's a particular requirement that is in 35 out of 52 states, well, it might be something that we might consider including into the protocols, just so that it's addressed and it's one less supplemental requirement. But anyway, that's something that we can have a discussion later on, but it's something that I was thinking that might help optimize the not necessarily the IDEA process, but the overall process by all state DOTs and all involved.
Right. Good. Thanks, Daniel. This one's from Tom Taylor, and I don't know the answer to this, but maybe Jeff does. I don't think we have an answer. So where are the milestones and the costs of the IDEA submittal on the website? Are they on the website? Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And Tom, thank you for the question. You bring up a valid point. The timeline and the process are contained in the protocol that can be downloaded from the GI website, so that is available. The schedule of fees, you are correct. They are not evident on the website. I just wrote myself a note, and I will plan to get that up there, very, very nearly in the future. But the total cost for the evaluation, it's in 4 phases. It's in the $35,000 range. And of course, all that considers the review team and the other activities that need to go on to produce a report and with the supplemental information.
Great. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
The next question is from Mike Bernardi. Are MSE walls the only system that can be evaluated by the IDEA program?
I think, we have the large block system type, gravity type of blocks, right, Jim? And other earth-hitting structures is what we originally started covering with IDEA. That doesn't mean, I don't know where the Geo-Institute wants to take it from there on, but I think there's a framework to move this forward to other systems or technologies.
Yeah, and so that's right, Daniel. I'd say that the GI vision is that this would grow into evaluations of maybe not just other earth retaining systems, but other innovations where a external review process would be warranted. So that would be if we really do a good job. And you're right. So currently we have a system that is a gravity wall system that is being evaluated in addition to MSE systems.
Okay.
Let's see. It looks like
Jim, sorry, just for everybody's benefit, they may not realize high-tech evaluated many other different technologies beyond retaining structures. So if you didn't know that, that's a true statement.
A true statement. All right. Thank you, Jerry. The next question is mine. So IDEA evaluations are, we talked about DOTs requiring update to evaluations. So the IDEA evaluation has a term limit to it, right? And that limit is 5 years. So any system that goes through an IDEA evaluation needs to be reevaluated in 5 years. And we actually completed one of our evaluations was for a system that had a high-tech evaluation that was quite old, and they wanted to update it. Their system hadn't changed. There's a minor change to their system. We evaluated that minor change, and that evaluation was probably happened in less than 8 weeks at a significantly lower cost than our full evaluations. Let's see, there's another question here. When do you think IDEA will be accepted as international best practice? What are the obstacles? Wow. I'll open that up to anybody that wants to chat a little bit about that.
I don't know. I personally don't know. I don't have any comments on that. I don't know what the requirements would be internationally or in other countries for system evaluation. So I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Well, and I would, my answer would be we're struggling with 50 states accepting IDEA evaluation as best practice. So certainly not until we have more states here that have accepted it would we even think that it's going to be accepted somewhere else. Jerry, anything to add to that?
I wouldn't put any money on any bet related to time. So never would be my view.
Never is a long time, Jerry. All right. Let's see. Here's another question. how are system modifications, innovations outside of AASHTO and or FHWA addressed by review team and considered by state DOTs? Maybe Ryan, you could answer the first part of that. I don't know if we can answer how states, or maybe Daniel can answer how states would handle that, but.
Well, I think this, Ryan, the first step is to, as a reviewer in the report, and actually in the submittal itself, is to clearly state that there is not AASHTO guidance on this particular item. And here's a theoretical criteria that was used to develop how this mechanism works, or how we utilize this design procedure, or whatever the innovation is. And that will get a detailed review, and the reviewer's opinions regarding that would be put into the report, and then the individual states could review and decide if they want to use something more innovative.
Great.
Jim, can you ask the question again? I missed.
Yes. So how are system modifications / innovations outside of AASHTO or FHWA addressed by the review team and considered by state DOT?
Yeah, I think that's what I just want to hear it again, just to make sure. I think I covered that a little bit during the presentation on a comment while Jerry was talking. The innovations and changes, are not, by definition, are not in our practice. So these innovations and changes that to the practice are going to need to be evaluated, I think, in how they impact the performance as it relates to our practice. So in taking a look at the research work that has been done for those innovations, to make sure that that research and the data that's been developed is consistent with what they're proposing to present for these evaluations. At the end of the day, the state DOTs will have to, so that information and that research work will be submitted to IDEA. They will be evaluated. There will be some recommendations or some thoughts in those evaluation reports related to those changes. At the end of the day, the state DOTs are going to be responsible, or they still have to review that, and they still need to make sure that is something that they want to consider for their state on a particular project. It may be for a given project that they want to try something, a particular innovation, because it's beneficial for that specific site conditions or whatever the case may be.
Right. Thanks, Daniel. I think that's all the questions. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Jeffrey to close up our webinar.
Thank you, Jim. Very much appreciate that. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Jerry. Very much appreciate that. Thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate all your work, and thank you for the questions. I was following the webinar on YouTube, and we've had about 70 or 80 folks attending, so thank you for that. Just want to again say, as you heard before, all 3 tutorials are archived at the Geo-Institute YouTube. You can subscribe to that for more content. If you do subscribe, I understand from Brad Keeler that you'll get an email saying what's available. As Daniel said, you can certainly contact Daniel and Silas at the Federal Highway, but as well as you can contact myself, and I'll make sure that I can direct the question to the appropriate principal of the IDEA program. I do want to take a time out for a second and congratulate Ryan Berg. Ryan Berg is the 2021 Martin S. Cap Foundation Engineering Award winner, and that award is for outstanding professional compliments. So Brian, well done and congratulations. And
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you're welcome. I wanted to thank everyone, and that concludes the webinar. And look forward to hearing more information from you about idea questions. And everyone have a happy holiday, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.